Hello and welcome to the first of hopefully many YouTube videos. This channel has been kind of a long time coming. I've been wanting to explore long form video for quite a while now, just haven't quite had the courage. I tend to be kind of a perfectionist and don't want to put things out unless they are perfect to my eye, but I would like to put a stop to that, and I'm just gonna go ahead and do this. I don't really care if it looks messy, I'm just gonna go ahead and do it anyway. So, the first topic that I wanted to touch on is kind of my origin story. I think it's something that a lot of people are curious about when they are looking at working with or even just following a spiritual practitioner. And it's not really something I can quickly and concisely describe to somebody, so that is what I'm going to be covering in this video. When I talk about my origin story, something that people typically want to know is whether I feel like my intuitive abilities have been with me since childhood or whether they are more of a skill that I developed later in life. I think for everybody this is a little different, and for me the answer is a little bit of both. Yes, I do absolutely feel like there were abilities there as a child. I just don't think I necessarily believed it myself. There were certain things that I said to my mom about the afterlife, about our loved ones who had passed away, and I also had a passion for history, ghosts, hauntings, mediums, and I really was passionate and felt connected to certain cultures that I knew nothing about as a 6-7-year-old kid. I was absolutely the child reading through encyclopedias about Greek gods, goddesses, deities, history, whatever I could really get my hands on. I just think it's interesting and something to be aware of that our passions and interests, especially early on in life, can be pretty indicative of our soul's purpose. So I grew up in a small town in Idaho called New Plymouth, and when I graduated high school, I moved to Boise to pursue a degree in psychology. My goal was to either work as a therapist or possibly to go on to get my doctorate degree and practice as a clinical psychologist. Instead, I ended up being offered a position right out of college, and from then on just never really felt aligned with pursuing further education. So I started out working at different levels in the caretaking field, and from there my passion for social work and human services just grew. I was able to work with adults, with children, with people from all walks of life, and there were so many parts of that work that I thoroughly enjoyed, especially the clients. But I just seemed unable to ignore the truth about social work, which is that it's demanding, it's low paying, and oftentimes your employers are asking way too much of you for way too little. The red tape was also especially difficult for me. Human services are very structured and for good reason, but unfortunately in my work I typically found that a lot of the restrictions in place were detrimental to the practitioner-client relationship and the client's progress. Time and time again I was told that we had to do things by the book. It didn't matter if my intuition was telling me that the client needed something completely different, and it just got to a point where I knew that I couldn't do it any longer and I needed to make a change for my own mental health. From there, I started my own Etsy shop making pet collars, which was really fun, and I really just took that time as well to focus on me, focus on healing, and kind of slowing down from the constant demand and stress that I had been under for years. So after I left my career in social work, I really just had more time on my hands, and I started to become interested in spirituality and intuitive abilities again. I started actually watching Tyler Henry on Netflix. He's actually now a pretty well-known medium, and I really appreciated how he described the way his mediumship works. I find that it actually works pretty similarly to mine, and it helped me developmentally to understand how he was doing the things that he was doing. I also ended up reading his book, which was helpful developmentally as well, just because it helped me kind of track my symbology and gain a clearer understanding of how my abilities worked. I had honestly never seen somebody read the way that Tyler does, and it completely opened up my mind to what mediumship could be. I think I had somewhat placed mediumship into a box and had people like the Long Island medium and more traditional mediums in mind, and just thought that there was one particular way that mediumship was supposed to look. But my mediumship doesn't really look that way, so that made me believe that I didn't actually have any intuitive abilities. His book and watching him work really broke it down for me in a way where I understood that I was channeling on a daily basis and just didn't really know it. Something else that I really appreciated watching Tyler was his humility around his abilities and his work. I think growing up watching mediums, there was a certain showmanship or grandiosity to it that I never really personally felt aligned with. And so I really appreciated the way that Tyler described how these abilities came to him, and then from there, how he worked to grow his abilities. That honestly really changed things for me, because I think up until that point I had been viewing intuition as like this magical gift or power that was granted to only a select few, and I completely disagree with that viewpoint now. So from there I was hooked, and I was listening to podcasts, reading books, practicing and adding meditation into my daily routine finally. It was something that I had honestly been avoiding for a long time because I just didn't see the value in it. Now I understand that what you're doing when you meditate is you're actually exercising that muscle, that intuitive muscle. So now I do see the value in it. Once I started regularly practicing meditation, that's when I could really start to sense things changing. I started to notice that I was more sensitive, that I was able to pick up on different energies around me, and I could just tell that things were amplifying. So it started with loved ones, and it would initially come in as thoughts about them, random smells, random feelings or emotions, and from there I was able to start distinguishing different energies and kind of learn how to tune into energies I was picking up on to distinguish who I was communicating with. This time in my life I was also going through a lot of personal healing and processing, and had really started to think about my life's purpose, humanity's purpose as a whole, what happens after we die, things like that. Throughout this 6 to 7 month process of developing my intuition, I had started to kind of get the hang of it and had become accustomed to the way my abilities were growing and changing. And I kind of just had assumed that my abilities would continue to slowly progress in that way. But it turns out I was in for kind of a rude awakening, because I actually ended up experiencing what is known as a Kundalini awakening. This is something that I am still learning about, still trying to piece together and fully understand. Typically, a Kundalini awakening is a process that can happen as you become more in tune with yourself and your intuition, and result in heightened sensitivity, enhanced psychic abilities, self-realization, and blissfulness. However, if you don't navigate the experience properly, it can create effects that appear very similar to mania or psychosis. In other words, this process can actually make you feel like you're going crazy and feel like your mental state is one that is not matching your normal self. Important to note, if you ever find yourself in this situation and happen to find yourself at the mercy of medical or mental health professionals, you will have to advocate for yourself, and they will drug and gaslight you to the moon. So just be aware that this can happen, and if this is happening to you, try to navigate it in a way where they can get on the same page as you. I understand now in hindsight, after learning more about Kundalini energy, I do think that this actually could have been avoided if I had understood the importance of proper grounding when you're accessing the spiritual realm. There is definitely a limit when it comes to channeling, and I just went too hard, too fast. The way that this experience started was that heightened sensitivity and enhanced psychic ability, and I actually experienced a sensation of like warm magnetic fluid like flowing over my skull. And as that happened, it was like a veil was lifted from my reality. And the first thing I saw was like 6 or 7 different loved ones that had passed and friends that had passed all around me. In that moment, I kind of started to believe that my abilities had just been flipped on, and from there I would be an expert channeler and have to do no work, and I would see spirits around me all the time, and it just simply doesn't work like that. But during this process, it did work like that. This experience was honestly a huge turning point for me, for my life, for my abilities, and it didn't freak me out except for I didn't understand what I was meant to do with it. I think now in hindsight, it was most likely just spirit showing me a little glimpse of what was possible if I continued to develop, and maybe it was a little boost of abilities. I honestly have no idea, and I'm sure I will forever be continuing to try and understand that situation. But what I learned ultimately was that I went too hard too fast, and that grounding is not optional. It's not optional. It's extremely crucial and important when you're doing this kind of work. And I talk about this experience because I want there to be some awareness around it. I think even as someone with a passion for spirituality and mediums, I absolutely had no idea that this existed and could happen to somebody, let alone that it's actually pretty common. Now, having talked to multiple other practitioners, they have either experienced something similar or they know multiple people who have. I even had one medium that I had a reading with tell me that she believes that like half of all mental health units are filled with people that are not understanding how to work with their intuitive abilities and believing that they are delusions. That is not at all to discount authentic mental illness. That absolutely does exist. I just think, unfortunately, because of our lack of understanding about communicating with spirit, I think it is very easy to confuse one for the other. So after this experience, I took some time. My husband and I traveled in a motorhome full time, and I ended up getting pregnant. And with the process of pregnancy, labor, birth, as cheesy as it sounds, my interest in the spiritual realm was kind of reawakened. In my experience, the process of, I guess, birth specifically felt otherworldly or like magical in a way, and it just really re-inspired me to get into this work. At this point, I also had a newfound confidence and inspiration that I might actually be able to do this work professionally. I had 2 readings with 2 different mediums who first thing point blank asked me if I already was practicing mediumship professionally. And it really got me thinking, and it really gave me the confidence to actually consider it for the first time. So for my 30th birthday, I gifted myself a past life regression and deemed it the beginning of my mediumship journey. And honestly, it was probably the perfect way to do that. The practitioner who did my past life regression is absolutely amazing and a medium herself. And the validation that she was able to offer me within that regression of literally being able to see the same things that I was seeing in front of me, it was invaluable. It completely convinced me that I do have intuitive abilities that are pretty strong and that I actually could do this work professionally. And I honestly left that regression convinced that that was what I was going to do. From there, my past life regressionist actually referred me to a amazing teacher, facilitator of spaces, and I am now part of this beautiful collective of practitioners, intuitives, people that are interested in growing their abilities. I'm able to take classes, develop my abilities, practice with other people. I started out practicing with other mediums, and from there I worked my way up to working with the public. And in, I believe, January of 2024, I took my first client. Thank you for sticking around to watch this video, and be on the lookout for more to come soon.